We've all seen bad trades in NBA history, the kind of trades you look back and think, what was that front office thinking? Then there are those historically bad trades that set franchises back years before they can start competing again. And of course, the first trade that comes to mind when you think of horrible trades is the Paul George transaction, where the Clippers mortgaged their entire future to bring in the superstar from Oklahoma City. But we're not here to talk about that. Everyone has talked about that trade ad nauseum and how it will go down as one of the worst trades in NBA history. Instead, we're here to talk about the current state of the LA Clippers and why, despite the fact that it's still very early on in the season, not even quite a quarter of the way through the year, but why the Clippers are not going to be able to recover from this poor start to the year, and no trade, no sudden change in personnel is going to save them from missing the playoffs this season. How? What makes this situation so bleak for the Clippers? Well, let's talk about it. As always, be sure to subscribe if you like this type of content, and in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, at the time of this recording, the Clippers are currently 5-15 in their first 20 games on the season. They've lost 8 of their last 10 and 13 of their last 15. And while you could say, well, every team goes through their rough stretches, every team goes through injuries that throw off the team's chemistry and continuity, and yes, the Clippers have had a harder schedule-ish, the fact of the matter is, when you watch this team play, even putting some of the stats and analytics aside for a minute, which I'll get to, they just look really, really bad. They're a slow team. They don't move the ball well. They're lazy on the defensive end. And by the fourth quarter, the guys look absolutely gassed, which, shocker, right? Who would have thought that the oldest team ever assembled in NBA history would get so worn out by the fifth quarter? But the way this team plays is so clunky, so backwards in terms of how the NBA is trending in a fast-paced style offense, and above all, you can see it in the players' body language, their demeanor, their lack of aggression when they're out there. They completely look checked out on this season. To be honest, they should be, because as of right now, the Clippers are so far behind in the standings, sitting 14th in the Western Conference. There is no way they are going to be able to climb out of this hole that they find themselves in. Not even Kawhi getting healthy and looking like prime Kawhi from the Raptors is bringing them out of this hole to where they can contend for a championship. I mean, first of all, we all know Kawhi is never going to be healthy. He's always going to be missing games or be on some sort of minutes restriction. But let's say for a moment that Kawhi, starting from this point forward, miraculously becomes healthy and doesn't miss a game for the rest of the year. The Clippers have 62 games remaining on their schedule. In order for them to finish even 500 on the season, they have to win 66% of their remaining games of the year, going 41-21 during that stretch. And let's be real, finishing 500 on the season isn't getting you into the playoffs in the Western Conference. You're a play-in team, and at best, you're making your way into the playoffs by way of the play-in, all but to just get swept by the Thunder in the first round. So for the Clippers to really truly compete and try and finish in, say, the top 5 in the West, they would need to win around 50 or more games, similar to what they did last season, where they won 50 games and finished 5th before getting knocked out in 7 games by the Nuggets. The Clippers would have to go 45-17 for the remainder of their schedule. They would need to win 72% of their remaining games just to get to 50 wins on the season, which, as we know, in a stacked Western Conference doesn't even guarantee you home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. And look, all of these teams that are ahead of the Clippers right now, outside of the Kings, the Mavericks, and maybe the Jazz, are suddenly going to go on massive losing streaks where they just completely fall in the standings. I guess you could throw the Blazers into the mix as well, but even the Blazers have looked considerably better than the Clippers have. And every other team ahead of the Clippers are actively trying to win. They're trying to compete, and outside of a major injury to one of their superstar players, they're not falling in the standings, or at least they won't slip so much that it'll give the Clippers an opportunity to make some headway in the standings. But even keeping all that in mind, and say the Clippers can somehow win 72% of their remaining games, what's changing for this team that suddenly makes them exceptional from what we're currently seeing? You're talking about a team that is in the bottom 5 in the league on defense, bottom 10 on offense, 24th in net rating, 28th in the league in pace. They don't rebound well, they don't pass the ball well, they turn the ball over at a high rate. The only thing they do well, literally the only thing they do well where they're in the top half of the NBA, is their free throw percentage, where they're actually first in the league. But even then, they're still 24th in the NBA in free throw attempts, so they're still not getting to the line often enough to generate easy offense. They're an old team that plays and looks like an old team that doesn't fit well together, and a team that looks like they know their season is done and has given up. What makes anyone think they could suddenly turn things around? And to compound the problem further, it's more likely that things are actually going to get worse for the Clippers before they get better. Yes, even worse than what we're currently seeing. Because you have to think, eventually we're going to get to a point where Kawhi Leonard and James Harden, they're going to ask out in a trade, particularly Harden, because James Harden is actually having a hell of a year. He's 36 years old. This is a critical season, a critical next couple of years for Harden's career. He can't waste these final years for a player that has never won a championship. He has to be looking at this team knowing there is no chance of winning a title or even making any kind of noise in the playoffs. He could very well push his way out, as we've seen Harden do so many times in his career. And if Harden becomes disgruntled and starts pushing his way out, what does that mean for Kawhi Leonard, who knows he's going to be sitting on a lottery-bound team without James Harden? Hell, most likely a lottery-bound team even with Harden. And if the Clippers are eventually forced to trade Harden and Kawhi before the deadline, yes, they will recoup some value for those guys. They may get a pick or two or a promising young player, but it's not going to be the kind of haul you would expect for a couple All-Stars when you're talking about older All-Stars who are in their mid-30s, and one in particular that is constantly injured throughout the season and on a max contract. And the reason I say that makes the Clipper situation even worse if they were forced to trade Kawhi or James Harden is because, unlike a lot of teams who could just throw in the towel, tank, and hope for a top draft pick, need I remind everyone that the Clippers do not control their pick for this upcoming draft. They traded their 2026 pick unprotected to the Thunder in that Paul George deal. So no matter how bad this season gets, no matter how far they fall in the standings, that only ends up helping the Thunder, who could potentially land a top 4 pick in a historically deep draft class for a team that is fresh off a championship run and poised to repeat this season. I mean, we always talk about how teams like the Kings and Pelicans, and to an extent the Mavericks, and how they have such bleak futures. Well, at least the Mavs have Cooper Flagg, and the Kings and Pelicans have some young players to work with and be excited about while also having control of most of their future draft picks. The Clippers, on the other hand, have no promising young players on their team. They trade away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and a future pick that would turn into Jalen Williams. They don't control any of their first-round picks until 2030 or any of their second-round picks until 2031. So in that sense, bottoming out doesn't really favor them. And then, of course, all of the stuff going on with the aspiration scandal and the investigation and the cap circumvention, just to pour some extra salt into the wound that if they are found guilty, the league could look to take even more first-round picks away from this team when they already have such limited draft capital as it is. So yes, I would argue this situation is much worse than anything the Kings or Pelicans are experiencing. This team is on a disaster collision course to nowhere, years of sitting at the bottom of the Western Conference for a long time before they're even able to regain control of all their future assets. For a team that was trying to do everything they could to win now, propel themselves to win their first franchise championship by going all in on superstars, has backfired in one of the worst ways we've seen in league history. I need to do a video on the Thunder and just how insane it is that they could end up with a franchise-changing generational talent after winning the championship and on pace to win over 70 games this season. We're talking about a dynasty in the making for years if that happens. I've been doing so many negative videos, so let's do a positive one where we praise a team for what they are doing. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you guys think of the Clippers and what they should do to somehow try and salvage this season. I'd actually be curious to hear your thoughts because I'm at a loss. So let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.